Hello everyone, welcome back to City Skylines, to the Altengrad city. In the last episode we went back into the old town and did some extensive expansion of it, together with some churches, a square, more trams of course, and so on. I said last time that I would like to build a second train station close to the places we built last time, but I would like to first define some different part of the old town, so that's exactly what we will do today. We will move all the way to the river and build a second bridge over it. This time it's going to be a historical bridge, probably the oldest one in the city, and of course we need to build all kinds of buildings around it on this side of the river, define the roads, detail this place, and so on. So the bridge is going to be positioned exactly where the two rivers meet, and this means that the bridge is going to be divided in two parts. I'm only going to build one part today, and that's going to be the part that goes from the old town, obviously, to the little, well, it's not really an island, but the place where the land ends because the two rivers meet there. So a second part of this bridge is obviously going to go over the second river, and on that little half island, whatever it's called, there's going to be some fortifications or something like that. Obviously not in use today, but some little examples of old fortifications or things like that. I would like to keep that for some future episodes, obviously, until we finish all of these parts and projects that I already told you about. Now, I really wanted to put the bridge, you can see that over here, I really wanted to put that bridge as low as possible because it's looking better if the arches are not so above the water, and it's also going to allow me to have the places on the riverbanks more nice because they're going to be closer to the river, which means that every retaining wall or any kind of quay that I'm going to build there is not going to be that tall, which is obviously not going to look all that great. So we had to move really down compared to the places that we have been doing last time. I think the elevation difference is quite a lot. So I was using the measure it mod, as you can see in the right upper corner of the screen, that I'm using that mod to measure all kinds of things for the roads and networks in general, in particular the slope, for example, in percents. So I was trying to find some real life references, what might be the maximum allowed slope for trams in urban areas, and apparently the highest grade for trams in Prague, for example, is 8%, which is quite a lot, and I was just using that as a basic reference if I can actually allow the trams to go all the way to the river in here. And I couldn't do that if the roads were going straight from that church square that I built last time all the way to this tiny little square that's in front of the bridge, because that percentage was actually a lot higher than that. So I had to make the road go slightly around. There's like a tiny little intersection you could have seen me build there where the tracks split again. The second part is obviously going to go somewhere else along the river, against the flow somewhere to that part of the city in the future. And this road is obviously going down in here. Now the total average grade in here is around 5%, which is still quite a lot for trams. And there might be some special conditions, applied to these tracks, so like lowered speed and whatever. But apart from that, it's fine, and it's perfectly fine to have it in here. Now, you may ask, why do you even have trams go on this historical bridge? Well, the answer is quite obvious. I just want to build trams everywhere I go. That's just what I do in this series and pretty much everywhere in City Skylines. So that's one thing, but the other thing is obviously the question, is it going to be historically accurate? Can I actually justify doing this? And yes, I can. I'm obviously taking inspiration from the Charles Bridge, which is located in Prague. It's a very old bridge, and it also had trams go over it in maybe these times. I think that they got rid of the tracks just before the Second World War or just after it. I'm not exactly sure at this point, but there were trams going over that bridge. They no longer do because it was not exactly all that fine for the bridge. Trams are heavy, I guess, but they were there. Now, what's really interesting about that solution is that they didn't have, and that's exactly what I'm doing in this build as well. In real life, they didn't have the overhead cables for the trams. Now, the reason for that was that at the start of the 20th century, the Charles Bridge, or it was probably a lot before that as well, but at this point, they were considering the Charles Bridge to be some historical landmark already. Now, we obviously today consider it like a super important historical landmark, and every time it's supposed to be like changed or reworked or just maintained, changing some stones and all that, it must be done with like really, really high care, right? And that was actually the case even 100 years ago when they were deciding to electrify the tram tracks, because before they were electrified, they were horse-drawn, and it was kind of fine. But with the electric traction, there's obviously the problem of providing the power. Now, they didn't want to make the bridge ugly by putting all the tram poles and the cables, the overhead cables. It would just not look all that great, right? We can all agree on that. And people agreed on that even back then. But they still wanted to have the trams electrified on the bridge. So they called one very, very skilled electric engineer of that time, and he actually came up with a solution to provide the trams with power from the ground, from the tracks that the tram was going on. Now, there's obviously two rails, so you can have the positive and the negative on both of them. I'm actually not sure if the trams of that time were powered by DC. Probably were, I'm not sure. But the point is that they obviously need to have 2 points. Now, there's the issue of safety. That's obviously the biggest issue in here, because it's on the ground, and if for some reason you step on both rails at the same time, then you get electrified and you die, most probably. So they wouldn't have that, so they had to create some sort of a solution. And this guy actually created a very ingenious solution. And this is, again, the start of the 20th century, so it's more impressive just because of that time. And there were some relays and electric things in there, and basically it meant that the trams were going on these little segments of powered rails, and every time it left some segment, it lost power. So even if you were to touch the rails right after the tram just got over it, you wouldn't get electrified because they were not powered anymore, because there were some special like mechanical contacts in front of the tram and at the back of the tram apparently, and they were just switching on and off the parts of the powered network that the tram was just on, right? So you wouldn't get electrified if you stepped on the rails. Now, unfortunately, probably even because it was done at this time, it was highly unreliable. So they got rid of it a couple of years later. They actually replaced the trams on the bridge with I think buses. But I'm not exactly sure. I didn't really find that if the buses were like still going on the tracks, but because the tracks were still there. And I'm not sure if they were just some kind of like combustion engine trams or something like that. Probably not. They were just simple buses. But they got rid of that too some time later. I think that in the 60s they finally banned all traffic on the bridge because they realized, the engineers realized that the bridge was not exactly taking it all that well, all the car traffic on the bridge. So they got rid of it. But we are obviously in the time period where we still have the trams go over the bridge. Now that's obviously going to go through some changes, but right now we're going to have the trams on the bridge with the unreliable system of the ground power for them, right? Now this is obviously also a tiny bit of excuse for me to just not detail in the power cables, which is a massive help, let's be honest in here, because putting the trams there, putting the cables there by hand is not exactly easy. Now in real life, when a tram car wanted to go on the bridge, it had to stop in front of the bridge where the ground power started and obviously the overhead power stopped. So that's why I put the tram stops right where the cables end. And in real life, the driver of the tram would have to go out of it and lower some of these mechanical contacts for the ground power, and obviously lower the overhead collector as well, so they can switch the modes of the power. So that's kind of simulated in this part of the project that I'm doing here, because the trams do need to stop there, obviously, to take in all the passengers. So we're just going to assume that the driver is also stepping out and doing some of these things, right? There's obviously going to be stops on the opposite side of the bridge, but we're not really there just yet. Right, so that was just some historical, thing about how it worked in real life and how I can justify not detailing the cables in the city. Like I said, things are going to change in the game in Altengrad as well. I'm thinking that probably in the Second World War or after it, there's probably going to be some changes, but I'm probably not going to spoil it all that much. We can just say that there's going to be some changes to the bridge and how the trams go over it. But anyway, let's talk about something else than just the bridge. You could have seen me at the start of this time lapse that I was not exactly all that sure how to position some of these buildings and even what buildings to put here. And I later decided to just create some sort of a tiny little square where the bridge starts. It's obviously where also the intersection is and where the trams are having that curve into the line for the bridge, right? Now, I decided to put that tower there. It's a black tower. It's actually a building called Black Tower. And I'm kind of considering it to be some sort of an entrance point to the city, to the oldest parts of the city from back when the city was probably a lot smaller. I really wanted to put some kind of a gate there, but I tried to use the Charles Bridge gates, but they were not exactly fitting all the buildings around it. So we don't have any gates there, but we have the tower at least, so, that's nice. I decided to also recycle some of the buildings that were already placed in the city. For example, the castle building, some portions of the castle buildings, and some nicer buildings in here along the river. Back in the old days, when the old town was probably all that Altengrad was, there might have been some old wooden buildings in here, maybe also like, I don't know, fisherman huts or something like that, like boat piers or something, some things like that, obviously. But all of those buildings were just torn down because the city expanded. Maybe something like that was not exactly needed anymore, and all these nice modern buildings might have been built here some 50, 100 years ago, obviously from this time period, counting from this time period we are in, right? Or maybe even older, but not that much. So these days, these buildings are probably some ministry buildings or just maybe museums or galleries or something like that. Well, galleries and museums probably a lot later as we progress in time, but ministry buildings, they could very well be. Now, this place is very important because, like I said in the beginning, it's going to define this portion of the city, and it's actually going to make it all very, very easy to me for building the train station, the second train station, because the tram roads, it would make sense for the trams to go to the second train station. So it was very important to define the roads before this and to make them go to the bridge because, like I explained, it's the lowest point or very low point in the entire old town. So I had to make sure that all the trams are realistically going up and down the slopes that we have in the city. Therefore, the roads that are positioned right now are positioned correctly how they need to be. And then we can obviously continue building other projects around them. So that was very important. Now, this episode is not exactly about the bridge, but most importantly about the places around the bridge, about all the buildings, about just the riverside itself, how I managed to build it. Like I said, it was not exactly all that easy to manage these buildings in here. I had to, again, like I said, recycle some buildings because I am really struggling with putting nice buildings in the city. It's obviously easy to just build the regular residential or commercial and office buildings because it's the most obvious thing. That's what I did with the previous episode. That's why I was able to expand the city quite a lot for the last episode because it was fairly easy to just put the same buildings over and over again. The buildings that don't look exactly all that super original, right? So you can place them multiple times and it's fine. But some more distinctive buildings, like for example these castles and the little urban palaces, those are not all that numerous in the workshop, and you have to recycle them if you want to build a city of this size, because obviously these kinds of buildings are very common and they are all different in real life, but unfortunately in the game there's just not that many buildings to choose from. So sometimes you need to build them multiple times. What's good in the game, though, is that you can clip them into different buildings. That's, for example, what I did with the Black Tower and this building that's on the side of it, which I'm not exactly sure what that's called. By the way, that's a very modern building, I believe, built in like early 20th century already. So this place might have actually been reworked in Altengrad. This place might have been reworked, as the time went. some buildings were just built here like one by one in time. So this place is definitely combining a lot of different time periods. Also, one more thing that I need to mention, in the time lapses in the bottom of the screen, you can now see the city's name and also the time period we are currently in, so that it's clear and I don't need to say it every single episode, because based on some of your comments, some of you probably thought that we are either way more in the past or that we are advancing in time in every single episode, which is not the case. Like I explained in episode 1, I first need to finish at least the core of the city, and then we're gonna advance in time so that we can do changes to already built city and expand it as it would be probably expanded in the more modern times. So there it is. Hopefully it's clear now. Anyway, that's all for today's episode, guys. Thank you for watching it. I hope you liked it. If you did, then you can always put a thumbs up underneath the video, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you're new here. I will see you next time. Take care and goodbye.